Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the MMA Sucker Podcast. As you can probably tell, I'm here on my own today. My co-host Tim is out of action this week, and will be out of action for the next few weeks. So we'll keep you updated on the socials at MMA Sucker on Twitter and Instagram as to when the and where the podcast will be available. So yeah, keep an eye out. But it's too good of an opportunity this week to pass up, so that's why I'm doing the pod on my own this week. It was, like I say, it was too good of an opportunity to pass up to break down and review UFC 275 that went down this weekend from Singapore. In the main event, I'm sure you've all seen by now, Jiri Prochazka chokes out Glover Teixeira in the last round, in the final round, in the fifth round. Official time is 4:32, so Glover 28 seconds from potentially retaining his belt. What a fight. It was a fight of the year contender without a doubt. I'll go into that. I'll go into the co-main event where we saw Valentina Shevchenko defend her flyweight title yet again and continue her dominance over the flyweight division when she outpointed Taila Santos narrowly via split decision to retain her belt. And then I'll talk a little bit on Zhang Weili, who defeated Joanna Jedrzejczyk by spinning back fist to knock out the former strawweight champion and essentially send her into retirement. Joanna announced her retirement after the fight, and yeah, we'll give a little career perspective on Joanna because she's without a doubt a Hall of Famer. We'll then look ahead to next week where Calvin Katar and Josh Emmett clash in what should be quite an exciting featherweight clash, and there's a few good fights on that card, so we'll have a look at those as well. But let's go to the UFC 275 main event. Glover Teixeira looking to defend his bout against Jiri Prochazka. What played out, me and Tim said last week on the show, Jiri he's awkward, he's difficult, and it's going to be difficult for Glover to get the fight to the floor and look to implement his jiu-jitsu game like we know he can do so well. What played out was, like I say, a fight of the year contender without a doubt, and one of the greatest ever UFC light heavyweight title fights. We had Jon Jones versus Gustafsson 1, and this slots right in there at the top of the list of great 205-pound fights. There was phenomenal scrambles from both men throughout the fight. We just look at the stats, the reversals for each man. This is UFCstats.com, so you can check it out yourself. But Glover Teixeira 2 reversals, Jiri Prochazka 4 reversals. I don't think we gave Jiri Prochazka the credit that he deserves for his scrambling ability on the ground. He was really good. And yes, he did just receive huge shots and huge bombs from Glover when he was on the ground. But I think the sub attempt from Glover, the arm triangle came in the fourth round. How Jiri Prochazka got out of that was phenomenal. Great scramble, and he was able to sort of land on top, and he got a minute of control time in that round despite getting taken down and largely controlled by Teixeira for the 2.5 minutes of the round. Teixeira controlled it, put the arm triangle in, but it was the whole submission over position for Glover Teixeira, which we saw in the co-main event as well, and that doesn't always pay dividends. I think the heart shown by both men, the chin on both men in the final round especially. Jiri Prochazka received some absolute bombs from Glover Teixeira, who was very, very close to knocking him out, to be honest. Prochazka has that sort of style of, once he receives a shot, he'll sort of drop his hands and bounce off the fence. Now, if Glover hadn't have jumped for the guillotine and tried to pull guard and lock in the guillotine, we're asking, would he have knocked him out on the feet, which would have been an absolutely phenomenal finish. I think I read online that the odds for Jiri Prochazka by submission in the fifth round were as high as 5,000 to 1, which tells you everything you need to know about how shocking that finish was. Glover should have kept it standing, but with those odds of 5,000 to 1, he probably didn't think that Jiri Prochazka was too much of a threat to him on the floor. But did he then jump for the guillotine because of the damage that he'd received in the first through to the fourth round? And, Jiri was landing at will. He was so much faster than Glover Teixeira. The pop on his shots yesterday, that pop dwindled the later the fight went, but that's naturally going to happen for both men. But you've got to think, were the shots that Jiri Prochazka landed, did they have more of an effect on Glover than we maybe thought? Hence the jumping for the guillotine. He didn't jump for a guillotine. He didn't jump for a submission at all throughout the fight. And then the 5th round, when he's got his opponent hurt, then that's when he jumps for the submission, which is, it was a strange decision by Glover. I've seen a lot of people bisping online. I think Luke Thomas were both saying, no disrespect, because he's a legend of the game, Glover Teixeira, but he did make a mistake by jumping for that guillotine. And I think Monday morning now he'll be kicking himself. I think when Jiri Prochazka had Glover sort of corralled against the fence, that's when he did his best work, because he was so much quicker than Glover. And similar to the Juliana Pena finish of Amanda Nunes, he got a rear naked choke finish with no hooks in, which is extremely rare to see, especially at the highest level. What's next for each man? We can't say for sure. I wouldn't be opposed to a rematch. Glover Teixeira said, "Did I look like a 42-year-old man in there?" And most certainly, no, he didn't. Run it back. If there was a rematch of that fight, I would have no qualms about that whatsoever. I think the fight itself was phenomenal. I think the rematch probably favors Jiri Prochazka ever so slightly, just because obviously he's got the win now. He knows where Glover's dangerous. He won't make the mistakes of trying to avoid the takedown by turning away and rolling out, because when he was turning and rolling, that's when Glover was taking the back, or that's when Glover was able to get on top of him. You can work his takedown defense, and he was sort of levels above. The 5th round aside, he was levels above in the stand-up. I could also see a fight against Jan Blachowicz happening. Obviously, the two went back and forth after the fight. But Blachowicz, after he was dominated by Glover in their title fight, he obviously returned a few weeks ago against Alexander Rakic. And in my opinion, didn't look great against Rakic. He won one round, lost the other round, and then won the fight on an injury. But that's a huge European fight, and that could do a stadium fight in Europe, no questions asked. I've got an article coming out later this week that I'll be sure to promote on the socials of who is next for Jiri Prochazka. And, I do allude to a couple of the potential options for him there. And, a slightly outsider option is Magomed Ankalaev or Anthony Smith. Whoever wins their bout at UFC 277 could slot into the lightweight title picture. But I think maybe the winner of that needs one more win, maybe even against a Glover Teixeira type fighter, to firmly put themselves in the title picture. And talking of rematches, let's go to the co-main event. I would not be against seeing Valentina versus Taila Santos again. Taila Santos, in my opinion, was potentially 3 rounds up going into the final 2 rounds before the clash of heads. It's since come out that she broke her orbital bone, which obviously led to huge swelling in her right eye, and Shevchenko taking over the fight. It's the hardest fight for Shevchenko at 125 pounds. It's the first time at flyweight that she's actually lost on the scorecards. Any judge has scored a fight against her on the scorecards. It's difficult because, it's the what if, what if she hadn't Taila Santos hadn't got the swelling to the eye. Unfortunately, we simply won't know. Because it happened, it wasn't an intentional headbutt. The two women were clashing. Shevchenko coming in as the slightly shorter fighter. We've all seen the replays of her. They're exchanging. Shevchenko's 5'5", Taila Santos is 5'6". So that that inch that Shevchenko had as a disadvantage, in a way, almost became an advantage, because when they were coming and the opposing style, Shevchenko fighting out of southpaw, Santos fighting out of orthodox, when the two clashed, the heads Shevchenko did get the sort of lower line, as it were, and came up, and we saw it actually twice in the fight. That is something that needs addressing, and maybe we see it in boxing all the time, that the guys are warned in boxing not to be careful of the heads. Points aren't taken away, but they're constantly reminded to be careful of the heads clashing. But in the fight, I think Valentina Shevchenko does what Valentina Shevchenko does. She always tries to, beat her opponents at their own game. But on this occasion, I think Taila Santos was too strong for Valentina Shevchenko on the ground. And, unfortunately, submission attempts without any real sort of, malice behind them aren't really scored, which, can be seen in this fight, especially. The submission attempts that Taila Santos had, I think they were being bigged up by the commentary, of course, because, you can't kind of show bias. But at the same time, I really don't think that the submission attempts were ever really dangerous. I'd argue that the submission attempts were, they seemed more of a control technique. The rear naked choke, the hand across the mouth, was more of a control technique for Taila Santos than it was an actual, dangerous, I could potentially submit Valentina Shevchenko from this position. It was just to control Shevchenko's movement, control her breathing. She had the body triangle on, I believe, in the second round when she did attempt a rear naked choke. But, hats off to Shevchenko as well. The adaptation that she made, she obviously recognized the swelling, or a corner recognized the swelling at the end of the third round, and the adaptation to then stand and be the aggressor and be the point fighter that we know that she can be, and put in the savage strikes that we know that she possesses. There's a lot of talk this week of her not quite being the knockout artist that people think that she is, but ask Jessica Eye, ask Caitlin Chikagian, ask Jessica Andrade. These girls have been finished by Shevchenko. Jessica Eye especially, I was getting sort of shades of Jessica Eye versus Valentina Shevchenko in this one, especially in the fourth round when Shevchenko was whacking the leg kick into the midsection of Santos, and then going up high, knowing that she maybe couldn't see the strike coming. And that's exactly what we saw when Shevchenko faced Jessica Eye. Is she was body kick, then she came up high, and obviously, we've all seen the viral knockout of Shevchenko knocking Jessica Eye out cold. I thought that there was a potential that could happen in this fight, but it didn't. It did go to the scorecards. Valentina was able to secure the takedown in the final round and really dominate Santos on the floor in that final round. I think if you just look at the stats, it's slightly skewed. Total strikes 234 for Valentina Shevchenko, only 128 for Taila Santos, but Santos, got over double the amount of control time on Valentina Shevchenko. I've seen a lot of talk online that Shevchenko, lost the first 3 rounds. I think that the swing round is that second round. It's the third round, I believe. As to which way did you score that round? I personally scored it for Santos. I thought she was 3-0 up going into the final, into the championship rounds. But the adaptation from Shevchenko in the fourth and the fifth was phenomenal. And I don't think that it's by no means a robbery that we call, and it's a contentious decision. Something that we do need to discuss is that 49-46 scorecard from Clemens Werner. Is that, come on, that's not, it's 3-2 either way. There's no way that Valentina Shevchenko won that fight 4-1, but that's a discussion for another day. I want to see the rematch. I think Santos will unfortunately be out for probably the remainder of the year. I don't expect to see her before January, February this time next year. She had surgery on that broken orbital. Hopefully, she recovers well from that, but I don't expect to see her back in action anytime soon. It was a bad injury. We all saw the swelling. We saw the sort of before and after pictures on social media. It was a rough one, and it wasn't an intentional headbutt, but it was a headbutt all the same. And I think Shevchenko is lucky that Santos wanted to continue on that fight, because if the doctor would have come in and said she can't see, Santos was winning the fight. She would have almost won it on a technicality. But I'm glad the fight did continue the way it did. Shevchenko makes yet another defense of a flyweight title, but I want to see that one back. If they don't run that one back, the next contender will come from Caitlin Chikagian versus Manon Fiorot. Them two clash. I think it's September the 3rd in Paris. Chookagian hasn't got anything for Shevchenko, and we saw that in their bout. You know, she was dominated badly in that fight, really quite badly. You know, I'm a big Chookagian fan. I think she's very good, and I think she'd be the flyweight champion if it wasn't for Shevchenko. But you know, Shevchenko did finish that one, punches to the head from crucifix is the official decision in official stoppage. Sorry, after 1 minute and 3 seconds of third round. But you know, she dominated that fight, and that, you know, the leg kicks, the takedowns, it wasn't competitive in my opinion. And you know, yes, Manon Fiorot is certainly competitive, but I just don't think she's we haven't really seen her ground game, and I don't think she's good enough to beat Shevchenko. There's a distinct hole in Shevchenko's game. Is, you know, she was controlled by Jennifer Maia. Obviously, she was controlled by Taila Santos at the weekend. It's the ground game. She's very good when she's the aggressor, but when she's having to defend off her back, she's not all that, you know, perfect like we used to seeing from Valentina Shevchenko. She's lucky that there are a distinct lack of wrestlers in the flyweight division. You know, there aren't a whole lot of wrestlers, you know, standout phenomenal wrestlers in women's mixed martial arts as a whole, especially in the top, you know, the top of the divisions. If you look at, you know, Juliana Pena isn't a wrestler. She's a jiu-jitsu girl with good wrestling, very good wrestling. But Amanda Nunes, good wrestling. Zhang Weili is turning herself into a wrestler. We'll go on to her in a second. But if you look down the women's flyweight rankings, you know, Caitlin Chookagian, striker, Lauren Murphy, gritty sort of boxer, brawler with some wrestling. Jessica Andrade has got decent wrestling, but nothing that Valentina Shevchenko couldn't deal with. Taila Santos, obviously, you know, she's not a wrestler, she's a jiu-jitsu girl, but when she got the fight to the ground, she was able to control Shevchenko. Alexa Grasso is not a wrestler. You know, I think there's one girl that would give Valentina Shevchenko huge problems at flyweight, and it's something that makes me quite sad, because it's Tatiana Suarez. We just don't know. You know, there's no point discussing Tatiana Suarez, unfortunately, because with the injuries that she's had and she has now, I can't ever see her coming back to compete at a high level without, you know, huge risk to her own personal health. And I think it's a shame, like I say, because I think that she really could be the one to cause Valentina problems. But you know, that's an argument for another day, unfortunately, because I can't see her coming back and competing for a title anytime soon. Going on to talk about title shots, Zhang Weili versus Joanna Jedrzejczyk. Now, this was a tough one to watch. You know, a lot of people like Joanna Jedrzejczyk, and I can understand why. You know, she's almost like, along with Ronda Rousey, she was the first lady of the UFC. She was the first huge star, I think, to come out of, well, female star, for it, without a doubt, to come out of Europe and break into the UFC and break onto the sort of worldwide MMA scene. And to see her knocked out via spinning back fist was rough. And the way she went down, you know, she sort of face planted. Really good stoppage by the referee. I can't remember who the referee was now, but it was a really good stoppage. Oh, it's Mark Goddard. So yeah, that's to be expected. Mark Goddard, really good. You know, we didn't need to see Zhang follow up with any strikes, but to me, it looked like Joanna had taken 2 years off, 2 and a bit years off, 27 months, I believe it was. That's what it appeared to be for me. Yes, she was focused. Yes, she was dialed in, but she was just, you know, it's not even a half step. I think she was almost a whole step behind Zhang Weili. And yet, you know, she dropped her with that leg kick early on. She sort of caught her going down. So she was still quick. She still had that speed. But Joanna is notorious for a takedown defense and not taking an awful lot of damage when she is taken down. You know, historically in her career, scrambles up against the fence, she's always been phenomenal. You know, she's long for the weight, so she can post on a single leg or on her arm to sort of get herself back. And you know, she wasn't able to do that in this fight, and that's credit to Zhang Weili, but also, you know, it's probably because she has taken all this time out. Yes, you can be in training for 2 years, for example, but at the same time, you know, training is only training. You know, sparring is only sparring. When you've got someone who hits that as hard as Zhang Weili and as ferociously as Zhang Weili with the threat of the takedown, it really seemed to affect Joanna. And Zhang, she's too powerful for Joanna Jedrzejczyk. It's just that the makeup of their bodies. Joanna is tall, long, speedy. Pop shot, point fighter, in and out movement, which is really so effective, because as we've seen throughout her career, she's made multiple title defenses before running into Namajunas. Zhang is much more short, stocky, and then with that short and stocky stature comes that power. It's the strikes you don't see coming that knock you out, and that spinning back fist is clearly, we've all seen the slow motions, we've seen the pictures. It's the back fist, it's the fist and the forearm that just land on the neck, between the neck and the ear of Joanna, just sending us straight down to the canvas. Dana White announced it'll be Zhang Weili versus Carla Esparza next. Rest assured, everyone that saw Carla Esparza's last fight, Zhang Weili will not let Carla Esparza stall. I think that's going to be a phenomenal fight, because Zhang has, without a doubt, the superior power, the superior stand-up, and she's forever progressing this wrestling game of hers now. She's got a takedown defense of 60%, because we know that Carla Esparza will come into the fight, look to take Weili Zhang down and dominate her on the floor. But Zhang hasn't fought an awful lot of sort of wrestlers. The girls that she has fought, Joanna Jedrzejczyk obviously didn't look to take her down in either one of their fights. Rose Namajunas, she couldn't defend a takedown from Rose in that second fight. Obviously, the first fight lasted only a little over a minute, so there wasn't any takedowns. Jessica Andrade didn't shoot for any takedowns. Tisha Torres, officially she shot for one takedown and didn't land it. And she hasn't fought an awful lot of wrestlers that are looking to grind her to the floor. So her takedown defense will certainly be tested in that fight. And I do see Zhang getting the win as and when that happens. Potentially by the end of the year, those two will clash, and we might have yet another title reign from Zhang Weili. But then you've got to ask the questions: well, does Rose Namajunas, with another win, face Zhang Weili and beat her again? We've got to be careful that the strawweight division doesn't stall, because you've got Mackenzie Dern, you've got Marina Rodriguez, you've still got Yang Xiaonan, you've got Amanda Hebas, who did fight up at flyweight last time out, but she's still in and around the sort of top of that division, or can be at least. And you got Jessica Andrade. Let's not forget, Jessica Andrade made a triumphant return to strawweight, within the past few months. So the strawweight division has the potential to stall, but at least we know that the next title fight will be Zhang Weili versus Carla Esparza. For Joanna Jedrzejczyk, as we've all seen now, she's retired. That hasn't come as a great surprise to anybody. Unfortunately for fans of Joanna, she kind of checked out. I feel that she maybe checked out before this fight, having gone 14-0 in the UFC. In MMA, she finished a career with a record of 2-5. It's rough. She's got back-to-back losses against Zhang Weili, back-to-back losses against Rose Namajunas, and that loss up at flyweight against Valentina Shevchenko. But if you just look down the names of some of the girls she's beaten: Jessica Andrade, Karolina Kovacevic at UFC 205, Claudia Gadelha in that epic second fight, and after their first fight, she obviously defeated Carla Esparza for the title back in 2015. Valerie Letourneau, obviously they were the co-main event to Holly Holm and Ronda Rousey at UFC 193. She's got the win over Tisha Torres. She's got the win over Michelle Waterson in the main event. She was an absolute star, and there's no doubt that she will be, she will enter probably as the second ever woman to enter the Hall of Fame behind Rousey. I think that she's a phenomenal fighter, and she can hold her head high. That she really put sort of European MMA on the map, especially for women. She was a phenomenal advocate. Yes, not everybody liked her trash talk, but that's what made her her, and that's what made Jedrzejczyk such a star for the UFC. And I think she was unlucky to never actually headline a pay-per-view, but her style, she didn't have that sort of one punch knockout power that maybe the UFC sort of require. But 16-5, 4 knockouts, 1 submission victory in her second ever fight back in 2012, and 11 decisions. Like I said, she never quite had that knockout power, that one punch knockout power. But you look at the finishes of Carla Esparza and Jessica Penne, it was that spiteful striking style of hers, which really led her to becoming that star. And to go 14-0, including 6 or 7 fights undefeated in the UFC, says all you really need to know about just how good she was in her absolute prime. Yes, she ran into Rose Namajunas, but she ran into Zhang Weili, and she was just undersized against Valentina Shevchenko up at flyweight. But let's not forget that she was the co-main event or the co-main event on 2 absolutely epic cards in New York. She's a star, and she'll go down as an absolute legend. Elsewhere on the UFC 275 card, I think that the highlights for me were Jake Matthews putting on the performance of his career against Andre Fialho. I think we forget that Matthews was kind of dropped at the end of that first round, but Fialho hasn't been credited with it, but he was definitely, if he wasn't dropped, he was definitely hurt at the end of that first round. But he was so slick on the feet, and Jake Matthews is, he's a submission fighter. He's a get you to the ground and try and grind you out. He's got 7 wins via submission, 5 wins via knockout, but he's actually yet to get it. That's his first ever, second knockout in the UFC, and that the only other knockout came at UFC 193. It was a doctor's stoppage. Where does Jake Matthews go from here? It's difficult because I think he's on the edge of contention at welterweight. But you've got the guys at welterweight are phenomenal. Shavkat Rakhmonov, Michel Pereira, Li Jingliang, Jeff Neal, Michael Chiesa, Neil Magny. That's just 15 down to 10. I think Jake Matthews, they're tough fights for Jake Matthews. Wherever, every single one of those are tough fights for Jake Matthews. With that being said, he does hold a win, if I remember correctly, over Li Jingliang. Is a unanimous decision victory in a fight of the night at UFC 221. Run that one back. If I'm Jake Matthews, I'm asking for that one to be run back, because you can then take it Li Jingliang's 13th ranked place at 170. I think with Jake Matthews, we forget just how young he is. He's still only 27. It's because he's been fighting in the UFC since he was 19. He made his UFC debut in 2014. He's really good, and if he goes and it looks anything like he did against Andre Fialho next time out, he's gonna be one not to mess with. I'm just looking at the Tapology rankings now. He's ranked 24th. Hopefully that'll be updated, but maybe we'll see him against Randy Brown, who's ranked slightly above him, who's on a 3-fight win streak. Maybe we'll see him against Santiago Ponzinibbio, who's he's fallen on tough times as of late, but Santiago Ponzinibbio, I think, would favor himself to be able to defeat Jake Matthews on the feet at least, and that's when Jake Matthews' ground game comes back into play. I think, outside of the 3 main fights, Jake Matthews, obviously they were pushed up to the main card, and Matthews, he delivered. Jack Della Maddalena gets another knockout victory. Again, a phenomenal performance from him, knocking out Ramazan Ameev in the first round. That body shots were horrendous. It was tough to watch. And Gomez Juarez with that huge knockout on the early prelim card. If you haven't seen it, without a doubt, go and have a look at it, because it's a huge knockout from a women's strawweight who, they're not notoriously known for their knockout power. Some news of the week. We obviously had the official announcement. Usman versus Edwards 2 is now official for, I think it's August the 30th. Me and Tim will break that one down closer to the time. It's about time that fight happened, and hopefully the fight can go ahead. Usman's obviously had hand injuries. Edwards has obviously just been out, and hasn't seemed to be fighting all too regularly, and he never really does, Leon Edwards, unfortunately. But it's a headline bout for UFC 278. It's a shame that couldn't have been in the UK. But it is what it is. It's taking place in Salt Lake City in Utah, and that's the only other fights announced for that. Luke Rockhold versus Paulo Costa, if that one ever goes ahead, and Victor Alamirino versus Jake Hadley. So there's already a British feeling on that card with Jake Hadley on there. And Leon Edwards is obviously going to headline the bout against Kamaru Usman in the rematch. Early prediction, I think Kamaru Usman gets it done by a decision. And just wrestles Rocky to a decision. But Leon Edwards is very good. I don't think he gets applauded he deserves. But like I said, me and Tim will break that one down closer to the time. That one takes place August 20th from Salt Lake City in Utah. Looking ahead to next week, we've got an Austin, Texas fight night card, Calvin Kattar versus Josh Emmett at featherweight. This could very much see the next featherweight title contender. Josh Emmett is on a extremely good winning run at the moment. He's 4 undefeated. If he picks up the win against Calvin Kattar, that'll be 5 undefeated. Defeated Michael Johnson by TKO or by KO. That was a savage knockout. TKO of Mirsad Bektic, unanimous decision against Shane Burgos, who we know is an absolute banger. And then last time out, unanimous decision against Danny Ige. But then now he's running into Calvin Kattar, who I think last time out we saw him with a huge chip on his shoulder. He was absolutely dominated by Max Holloway in their headlining bout. And many picked Giga Chikadze to do the same thing, and he battered Giga Chikadze. After that rough first round, Calvin Kattar put it on Giga Chikadze and was close to making him quit in that fight, I believe. And the doctor could have stepped in, the corner could have thrown the towel in. Calvin Kattar, for me, is, aside from Max Holloway, the best boxer in the featherweight division. No questions asked. He comes from that New England cartel team who they do put an emphasis on their boxing skill, and Calvin Kattar emphasizes that. What do I expect from this match? I expect Calvin Kattar to lay it on Josh Emmett. Be slightly wary of the stats, especially on Calvin Kattar's side. The strikes absorbed per minute, 7.64. That sounds like a lot of strikes absorbed per minute. The majority of those stats are skewed from the Max Holloway fight. So, take those stats with a pinch of salt. I think, it's going to be a boxing heavy approach from both men. Expect leg kicks from Josh Emmett, and expect Emmett to even maybe try and mix in a takedown. With that being said, Calvin Kattar's takedown defense 89%. It's going to be tough for Josh Emmett, in my opinion. I think Calvin Kattar gets it done. I think he probably gets it done via unanimous decision. I think Josh Emmett is just too hard-headed, to be honest, to be finished via strikes from Calvin Kattar. But that being said, we haven't seen Josh Emmett compete in quite a while. It was December of last year that we haven't seen him compete. Before then, he took a year and a half off after defeating Shane Burgos, and he's not getting any younger. Josh Emmett, I believe he's mid-30s now. So it's time for Josh Emmett. If he's going to win this bout, he has to call out the winner of Holloway Volkanovski. He has to call out the winner, otherwise, his career could certainly stall. The co-main event, we've got Donald Cerrone versus Joe Lazone. This one was meant to go ahead a few weeks ago at, I think it was UFC 274. These two men were set to clash, but Cerrone fell ill. I think even after, from what I believed, that they even weighed in. Yeah, so it was UFC 274. Cerrone got an illness on fight day. That one was pushed back. It's a loser leaves town fight for me. Cerrone versus Lazone. Cerrone, he's been known as that I'll fight anyone, anytime, anywhere, fighting all the time. We haven't seen him since May of last year. It's the longest he's had out in a long, long time. And then it was a standing TKO loss against Alexander Moreno. He hasn't actually won a fight, an MMA fight at least, since 2019, since May of 2019, when he dominated Al Quinta to a unanimous decision. And I think his style, his stand-up, is going to be better than Joe Lazone's, and then Joe Lazone's ground game is going to be better than Donald Cerrone's. Let's see how these two match up. We haven't seen Joe Lazone in a hot second either. It's October of 2019. 2019 is the last time we saw Joe Lazone. Luckily, we saw him, weigh in last time out at UFC 274. So we know that he's, he can make the weight. He's still fit and healthy. So, that one features a co-main. Got Tim Means versus Kevin Holland. Kevin Holland making the second welterweight appearance of his career, or his UFC career at least. So keep an eye on that. Joaquin Buckley returns, and I think Jasmine Jukadavicius. I've butchered the pronunciation of her name, I'm afraid, but she returns. Last time out against Kate Hansen, absolutely dominant. She dominated Julia Palastri in Dana White's Contender Series, and she takes on Natalia Silva, who's making a UFC debut. I think Jasmine gets a win here with ease and progresses even further on in the strawweight in the strawweight division. I think it's a strawweight fighter from what I believe. Flyweight bout. So yeah, Jukavicius will get the victory here. I think she's a really good fighter with solid stand up and can take the fight to the ground if and when she feels that she needs to, and if she ever does need to. Elsewhere outside of the UFC this week, we've got the PFL. Clay Collard versus Alex Martinez is headlining the bout. We've got Antonio Carlos Jr., Oliver Aubin Mercier, Jeremy Stevens versus Miles Price on the card, Marcin Held on the card, Rob Wilkinson's on the card. I believe that our own Nate Freeman will be live at the event. So keep it locked to MMA Soccer on Twitter and Instagram for sort of live coverage of that event. Nate will be there breaking everything down for you there. And then in the world of boxing, we've got the biggest fight this weekend is Artur Beterbiev versus Joe Smith Jr. for the WBC, IBF, and WBO World Light Heavyweight title. Sorry. Obviously, as we know, the other guy in the division is Dmitry Bivol, the guy that defeated Canelo a few weeks ago. This is a huge fight because I think that this one sets up a potential unification bout against Bivol next time out. And that's what that's what we need to see. We need to see more unifications. We saw Devin Haney defeat George Kambosos a couple of weeks ago to capture the undisputed belts. We need more. We need more of that. Elsewhere, we've got they're flyweight, so they don't get an awful lot of love. But Rung Vasai returns. That's actually in a few weeks, and Beterbiev is this weekend. It's the 18th. So yeah, that'll be Saturday. But after Beterbiev versus Joe Smith Jr., without a doubt, if you can, be sure to check that out. Beterbiev is an absolute finish machine. Got 17 wins, 17 knockouts. Joe Smith Jr. is a WBO title holder. If you remember, he's the guy that fought Bernard Hopkins and knocked him out of the ring in Bernard Hopkins' final ever fight. He does hold a loss to Dmitry Bivol via unanimous decision. So, that could be one that he really wants to get back. But, Joe Smith Jr. is extremely good, as is Artur Beterbiev. So be sure to tune into that. From myself this week, we'll have the Who's Next for Jiri Prochazka. We'll have a look at a couple of the other talking points, and keep it locked to MMA Soccer for all your news, your MMA news, because we will have it all. Breaking news, career perspective on Joanna Jedrzejczyk. We will have it all for you. Staff picks. Like I said, Nate will be live at the event of at PFL this week, so be sure to keep it locked to socials because you don't want to miss a thing. And at MMAsoccer.com, we will have it all. Be sure to follow me on Instagram at Frazer Crone Writing, on Twitter Fraser_Crone on Twitter, and I'll keep you updated on the socials as to when the podcast will come out next week. Hopefully this will make it to YouTube. If not, it'll just be an audio only platform because I've got to edit myself this week. So take it easy, guys, and I'll speak to you soon.